Okay, well, in the interest of time, we'll get cracking. Very warm welcome indeed to this Innovation Forum webinar. It's the third in our EUDR Unpacked series, and today we're going to be looking at soy and palm plantations in particular. We're going to have an introduction and then a bit of context setting, and then we will have a palm oil panel, we will have a soy panel, and then we will have an open Q&A with everybody thereafter. Do go to the word cloud and put your answers in there. What concerns you most about the effects of EUDR? We'll keep that up for the duration of the webinar. Always very interesting to see what everybody is saying. We will engage with you all via the Q&A function. So do please be thinking about your questions and comments as we go. Put them into the Q&A function. And then if you like other people's questions, you can vote for them. And the most popular questions are the ones that I will be using in the open period towards the end of the webinar. Okay, so before we start, I thought it might be useful just to run through some of the points that came out of our webinar last week, looking at coffee and cocoa. Some of the things we talked about include, we talked about the challenges of meeting deforestation fee requirements, particularly for smallholders burdened by high costs, unclear guidelines, and land tenure complexities. We talked about the importance of equitable cost sharing, improved traceability systems, and targeted EU funding to support farmers. We talked about the need for equitable distribution of financial burdens. And we also talked about some of the opportunities presented by delay implementation and refining processes and enhancing support for farmers, whilst we also called for collaboration among stakeholders to ensure the regulation success in promoting sustainability and protecting forests. If you want to refer to that webinar, there are recordings available on the Innovation Forum website. Okay, well, to set the scene today, I'm delighted to be joined by Michel Desilets. Michel from the Orangutan Land Trust. Welcome, Michel. Give us a bit of a context as to what the impacts for the conservation community is from a delay of the EUDR. Michel, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Yes, so just a little bit of background that Orangutan Land Trust works to enable long-term solutions, sustainable solutions for this long-term survival of the orangutan. So my work in palm oil over the last two decades means that, I've really focused on the Southeast Asian region. So I'll be talking mostly zooming in on that area, but I'll talk a little bit more about the general reaction of my colleagues and other organizations around the globe working in conservation. Now, first of all, we discussed a bit about the limitations of the EUDR in itself, and that the general feeling was a little bit along the lines of too little, too late. And now, quite regretfully, much later, or at least a year later. And so there's also some dismay that the legislation leaves out some ecosystem types, such as savannas and wetlands. But a big message coming back to me was that if they felt it needed to extend to even more drivers, particularly mining. The Forest Watch in Indonesia was not pleased with the 2020 cutoff date, and said that it seemed to forgive activities that caused deforestation before that. They felt it should be much earlier. They also felt that the process didn't involve enough civil society organizations from the ground who are concerned about forest conditions, and make several policies in the EUDR not quite in accordance with the conditions on the ground, such as determining the cutoff date, the definition of forest, deforestation, degradation, and the methodology for calculating forest cover. But when we start talking about the delay, of course, NGOs by and large were very angered by even the suggestion of the postponement of the delay, and campaigned right up to the last minute to encourage Parliament not to postpone. Greenpeace called the delay devastating. Mighty Earth said that delaying the EUDR was like throwing a fire extinguisher out of the window of a burning building. and added that delaying the EU's zero deforestation law by just 1 year is a catastrophe and will result in the added destruction of over 200,000 hectares of precious forests worldwide due to the EU's thirst for these major forest risk commodities. Global Witness were vocal and suggested that the forest loss would be an area 14 times the size of Paris, while BirdLife International compared it to an area the size of Moscow. Now, in any case, a forest clearance of this scale will accelerate climate change, devastate biodiversity, and increase the risk of even more floods, fires, and droughts. We think back to the report of palm oil and biodiversity from the IUCN. They identified 193 vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered species across the globe, which have palm oil as a major threat. So this delay, of course, will result in continued heavy impact on those species. Now, prior to the vote, our friends at World Resources Institute said that the EU's environmental footprint and consumer influence are disproportionately large, and that means that the world's forests cannot afford another year without stronger protection. So you can hear that there's quite a lot of dismay here. They added that the delay has undermined Europe's environmental credentials and its role as a global leader in the fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. And with biodiversity crises on the rise, we've not a moment to spare in combating deforestation. Now, if I zoom down into the Indonesia and Malaysian area, the potential impact of the EUDR itself in that region, one message was clear from my colleagues. While they all welcomed that EUDR, they felt it would make very little difference to deforestation in the regions where they worked. And this is because the expansion of palm oil in Southeast Asia is now on a downward trend. Most of the damage has already been done. Most of the EU supply is originating from Southeast Asia, and we know that already 93% of that is already certified by the RSPO. So presumably a lot, going to be acceptable by EUDR in some fashion. So in that regard, the desired impact will be marginal. One colleague in Sabah said that most of the forest loss that is going to happen for production of plant-based commodities has already occurred, and that the future loss will be due to mining of nickel, gold, coal, etc. And that was echoed loudly by a colleague in East Kalimantan who said now the biggest threat to the survival of the orangutan there is mining. I'll finish off with saying that all in all, the NGOs that I looked at supported the objectives of the UDR. It was they called the legislation important and ambitious. Chester Zhu said that the EUDR could be the first global legislation which sends a clear message that consumers care about deforestation and the impact on wildlife. Now, the legislation could encourage and inform legislation measures in other markets, such as the UK due diligence legislation, the New York Declaration, and perhaps less so, regrettably, for the Forest Act in the US due to the recent election results. The EUDR sends a clear signal, an important signal to all countries and companies that are producing, importing, and trading in forest risk commodities. These commodities must be produced without resulting forest loss to meet climate, biodiversity, and sustainable development goals. And this, of course, means that ultimately, if not belatedly, the EUDR will positively impact biodiversity.
Thank you. Briefly, are there any upsides, do you think, or in your opinion, to the delayed implementation?
Yeah, certainly there's going to be the upsides, that the opportunities, like I mentioned, to work with civil society more to understand the reality on the ground and make the processes work in accordance with the reality is on the ground. Also, the opportunity to perhaps look at the smallholder issue. If we recognize that the smallholders make up about 40% of the palm oil supply chain, they need to be part of the effort to fight deforestation. If we see companies simplifying their supply chains in order to comply with the EUDR, we lose out the smallholders. So this time to perhaps look at jurisdictional approaches and how they are dealing with the issue, the thorny issues of land tenure and so forth, and and either, leave out smallholders from the legislation altogether, or learn how they can be best incorporated in there rather than just excised from the supply chains. So I think those are the positives that we can is the planning space, the time to test methodologies, compare notes, and deliver real impact. We can't decouple deforestation from biodiversity loss, and I think we need to better understand those implications in order to roll out a robust legislation.
Great, thank you very much,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
Really great context setting there. So I'll come back to that here, and Michelle will be back when we have our Q&A in 50 minutes or so. So thanks very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay, let me bring in our palm oil panel, please. We have Mansuetus from SPKS. We have Michelle. We have Ruben Brunsveld from RSPO, and we're Weepeng from Louis Dreyfus. Welcome to you all. Okay, let me put this first question to Ruben then from our RSPO. What are the consequences of delaying EUDR?
Well, thank you for having me here today, Ian. I think the work of the RSPO and the EUDR are really very complementary, and we have supported EUDR really from the beginning. As preventing deforestation is obviously one of the cornerstones of our standard. You asked the positives, negatives about this delay. I would say that most of us will agree that the timeline that was foreseen was very optimistic. We have worked very hard to be ready to implement our new trade certification and traceability solution, which isn't part of our answer to the EUDR, and we are ready by the end of this year. But there are a lot of instances. I know national competent authorities, a lot of companies are struggling with this deadline for the end of the year. So I think from that perspective, there is an opportunity here to implement it better than otherwise it would have done if we had gone ahead at the end of this year. It gives more time for real conversations with the people on the ground, as Michelle just said. It gives more time for the national competent authorities to get their knowledge and their systems up and running, and it gives more time for companies to really implement it in the way it should be, so that hopefully it will be really a success from the get-go as we move to the new deadline.
And what has been the response from your members? Is it a frustration or welcoming this, or what are you hearing?
Well, the RSPO is a member-based organization with 7 different member constituencies. So we have environmental NGOs amongst our members and social NGOs amongst our members. We also have consumer good manufacturers and retailers amongst our members, and everything in between. So the responses are different, from people who regret it to people who say, well, this gives us a bit more breathing space. But overall, I think we can say that we really want the EUDR to be a success, to be implemented, and to make the difference that it's supposed to have. And in order for that to happen, this further delay might be something that gives us all a little bit more breathing room to implement it correctly.
Okay, thanks, Ruben. Mansuetus, you represent Indonesian palm oil smallholders. What has been the consequences of EUDR delay for your members?
Yeah, about EUDR, our organization and members are ready to implement the EUDR, because we see that the EUDR will help oil palm smallholders, especially access to global market, and help improve palm oil governance and improve farmers' income through fair price and fair partnership between smallholders cooperative and companies. And also, we believe that the EUDR will encourage and pressure palm oil companies to work with smallholders farmers in the field and act fairly for farmers and local communities. Regarding the implementation of EUDR, I think the EU has provided enough time for everyone to provide input and prepare some requirements to comply with EUDR, but we see that about the delay, we calculate that there were 18 months of negotiation between the parties, but 18 months without any improvement. So we see that 18 months without real action in the field level. For example, in our country, Indonesia, recently the government developed a national dashboard that claim to be a national traceability system. We know that the system will be useless because it is not useful for EUDR implementation. In addition, there is no pressure from central government for companies to meet the EUDR, and in generally the state intervention is too dominant to protect companies from deforestation by prohibiting the transfer of data like coordinate point to the EU system with a data protection policy. I think this is a problem. We don't know whether the delay will make them work or not. I don't know exactly. But the consequence of delay, I think we are disappointed with the proposed postponement. This delay basically means two things. The first, organization proposing the delay want to hide irresponsible practice in their operation. The second, their reluctance to invest in responsible practice, including in supporting smallholders farmers. Now that the delay has been approved by the EU, so we can only hope that they will clarify the clauses regarding monetary and non-monetary support for smallholders farmers, and also what the support by supply chain actors and also EU government. Because we all know who will suffer the most from EUDR delays for smallholders. Delay means continue abuse by large companies against smallholders farmers. The second, our forests, which have been affected by plantation expansion. That means we will all lose. I urge the government must encourage the companies to accelerate of the implementation of EUDR and create it transparent and accountability on their supply chain. Also, accelerate farmers on the data collection and institutional development, and facilitate fair partnership between companies and farmers cooperation. The last, to the EU government, immediately formulate funding policies to help palm oil farmers be traceable, and provide training to the government and companies so that they can understand technical policy and understand for implementation. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Again, lots to come back on there, but thank you very much indeed for that context setting. Perhaps I can turn to you from Louis Dreyfus. What are, from your perspective then, on the implementation or the consequences of EUDR delay?
Thank you, Ian, and everyone for the exchange today. Well, I think for us, we are a supply chain manager. Our responsibility is to move the EUDR compliant products or EUDR aligned products from the origin into the European Union. So as a market player, the most helpful thing for us is clarity and certainty. So we need these two to really function effectively. It has been a difficult few months while waiting for the final decision on the possible postponement, so which got validated today, 2 hours ago, less than 2 hours ago. So it's a moment of clarity that we welcome because with the clarity we can function and we know what products expectations there are from the destination. So I think that this is the most important element for us. So we hope that this approved postponement will be respected, and we need that certainty to into 2025 to prepare ourselves with a validated framework into 2026 implementation. And for us, we believe this postponement will also provide more time, as colleagues before me already elaborated, hopefully to get the smallholder players ready for EUDR compliance. And unfortunately, this is a market-based decision. Without intervention and proactive support for providers, the destination, they will choose the cheapest origins with the lowest compliance cost, and which often leads to the exclusion of smallholder players because it requires financial resources, technical expertise to support the smallholders. Without that intervention, which needs to come from both the industry and the governments, we believe from what we have seen a little bit in 2024, the market decisions tend to go with the origins with the lowest compliance costs, which is not what we would like to see. So we will continue to play a proactive role to facilitate, hopefully, this technical and financial support to smallholders into the supply chain. In Indonesia, for example, we have been proactively engaging with our supplying mills and refineries and encouraging them and offering financial and technical support to work together to do the smallholder mapping. And now with the national dashboard framework in Indonesia, we're encouraging all our suppliers to proactively connect with this initiative to get themselves and their smallholder suppliers onto the national dashboard as soon as possible. So there's a lot of work that we still need to do, and we cannot slow down and relax too much because of this 12-month delay.
Thank you. I was trying to see, because I knew that the Parliament were voting today. Have they have actually voted, and they voted for the delay of 12 months and nothing else. Is that correct? Okay, great. So at least finally clarity. It was we weren't sure where the vote was going to come through. Well, thanks very much indeed. Let's talk a bit about the challenges in getting smallholders in scope and involved within the EUDR's requirements. I mean, what for you, Ruben, are the challenges for getting smallholder farmers involved? RSP, I know, has very specific smallholder rules and regulations and guidance, but how do you see, or what is for you are the keys to getting smallholder farmers involved inside the EUDR?
Well, I think Weipeng was very accurate in her description just now in saying that there, and if I reformulate that a little bit for myself in saying that there is also a wrong incentive built into this regulation for companies to externalize and push away all the risks out of the supply chain, because it has a zero tolerance with these very high fines attached to it when it comes to deforestation. So of course the business, the pure business decision would be to externalize your risks and perhaps stop working with smallholders, which is what nobody here on this call wants. So we really need to make sure that companies are doing what Wei Peng just said and work with smallholders and work actively, have a policy to keep smallholders included in their supply chain. And we also have to look at other possibilities that there are to support smallholders. One of the supply chain models that the RSPO works with, for instance, is the mass balance supply chain model. Now, the European Commission has consistently said that mass balance is not compatible with EUDR. We disagree with that, and that is because the European Commission defines mass balance as the mixing of EUDR compliant and non-EUDR compliant material, which is not allowed. But most of us in the trade and in the sector, when we talk about mass balance, we mean the mixing of certified with non-certified material. And that is allowed as long as you can show also from the non-certified part that is deforestation free and legally produced, which are the only two requirements of EUDR. So that MB model is still possibly compliant with EUDR, and also EUDR does not prohibit the buying of credits, which is another way, the book and claim system that the RSPO has to support directly smallholders, which will come at an added cost together with your EUDR compliance. But if companies in Europe are also serious about their ambitions in supporting smallholders, which we encourage them to be, then that is another way that they can use to support smallholders by keep buying the credits that they have done in the past from smallholders in the producing countries.
What about the issue around the costs involved in bringing smallholders inside the EUDR scope? But where should those costs lie?
Well, it's obvious that we can't put those costs on the smallholders, right? I mean, that is just we are talking about significant costs from a smallholder perspective here. We've heard European politicians say that it's easy to get traceability because every smallholder has a phone these days, and you walk with your phone around the plot, and you have your geodata, which is a huge oversimplification of actually a complicated and technical process. So these costs cannot be put purely on the smallholders, but we have to work with all the companies in the supply chain, and then I really mean from let's say the operators and processors and the ones buying it at the mills to all the way the companies in Europe, to make sure that these costs are absorbed as much as possibly by the supply chain. And in addition to that, the European Union needs to make sure that it invests in smallholders in producing countries, which, for instance, at the moment is being organized through the I believe it's called the Team Europe initiative, where the European Union is trying to allocate more funding that could go towards smaller initiatives.
Thank you. Mansuetus, I want to bring you back in. What are the keys for you in the specifics that enable your colleagues to be inside the EUDR, and what do you need to be done?
I think the challenge of smallholders at the local level difficult to find companies that are committed to the EUDR. It is the problem. We don't know what companies committed for EUDR market. All companies they don't openly to public, yeah. So we don't know where their companies are located that are ready to meet EUDR. I think for farmers, reference on EUDR, the farmers just provide like a polygon map or coordinate point. I think it is enough to comply with EUDR. But how to create a deal with the companies around their plantation, and the farmers at the local level, they don't know the companies around them, around the farmers' plantation. They don't know they will sell their product to EU or not. The farmers don't know about that. So it is a challenge of the farmers. And the second is the farmers, they are still skaters, yeah. Okay, they already comply with the legality aspect, or coordinate point or polygon map like that, but they are still skaters. So, so need to be assisted by the companies and local government to form like a cooperative, smallholders cooperative, and then create a deal or partnership with the companies. And the third is what the incentive for them. For example, okay, I think Ruben already say about that, about the, for example, RSPO, they get the premium price, but for EUDR, okay, farmers comply with EUDR and then create a deal with the companies at the local level. And then what the incentive for them? Like a premium price, like RSPO process, like that.
Thanks so much. Wee Peng from Louis Dreyfus. I wondered what your perspective is on this, for ensuring that smallholder farmers are involved in the in supply chains post full implementation.
Yes, thank you. Based on our interactions, engagement with our suppliers, first of all, we don't have direct access to smallholder farmers. The closest we are is to source directly from mills and who have smallholders in the supply chain. So, but through our interactions with our suppliers, which are mills in this case, the awareness on EUDR, especially at smallholder level, is almost non-existent. So they don't really, have too much, concern in terms of where the final product goes in terms of destination markets, whether it goes to the EU, whether it goes to Asia. Currently, it doesn't really, deliver a direct financial or non-financial impact for the smallholders. So for them, I totally echo Pak Darto's comments that if there is not really a particular, incentive or benefit to be seen and received at the smallholder level, it's hard to imagine them, being particularly interested to make an extra effort towards the EUDR compliance, because again, it doesn't really matter too much what the destination market they are serving. It's completely out of their hands and out of their reach. And to be honest, to create the polygons of their plots, to create the geocoordinates of the plots, and then to collect evidence or conduct due diligence for legal compliance, all these things we're talking about towards EUDR compliance, they are not supposed to be performed by the smallholders themselves. They don't typically have the technical capacity, the knowledge, or the understanding to actually do these things themselves. So it's typically conducted by implementation partners, by companies like us, who are operating the supply chain, who have the access and who understands the EUDR compliance requirements, and who have the means to actually enable these activities. So I think here, the role of the smallholders themselves, to be honest, is really limited. It's more, the other actors, the stakeholders. We are the ones that need to enable them towards compliance. So I think that's very important to understand where the technical support, where the financial assistance needs to go and be channeled towards. So yeah, I think that's an important point to clarify.
Well, thank you very much. I want to put that back to you, Ms. Mansuetus. You mentioned earlier that you think that, or you hope that large companies will work with smallholders and smallholder groups and improve conditions. Why do you think that? Do you have are you seeing that happening? Are companies working with you?
Yeah, some companies working with us, but discuss about to comply with the EUDR, because the EUDR requirement is very specific. This is like segregated, yeah. And we are working with the companies but almost the companies, they are use mass balance, yeah. They are not segregated. It is a problem for us. Okay, I think I respond to Weipeng. I think we need the companies more be transparent. For the example, okay, our location in this district, our location in this province, so our members can create a dialogue with your supplier in the local level. I think it is a point of us, and why I say in previous, the challenge of the smallest farmers, we don't know the companies who committed to the EUDR. It is the problem.
Okay, thank you. Lots to come back from there, and I know that we've had some more questions specifically on this issue, and we can come back to many of them. Please do keep your questions coming. We will come to them very shortly. But let me bring in our soy panel, please. My thanks to our panel. See you shortly for Q&A. So we've now been talking about the soy sector in particular. So I'm joined by Heleen from IUCN Netherlands, Will Schreiber from Suikil and also representing the Retail Soya Group, and Susanne from Donau Soja organization. I apologize if I got that mispronounced that. Welcome to you all. Heleen, perhaps I can turn to you first. So let's very simply, what's the impact of EUDR delay, as we now know is certain, for the soy sector?
Yes, thanks for the question. To be honest, I think also that now that it is decided, it allows the sector to better prepare. There was a lot of, some lack of information on details, and the details are important in the implementation. So there is still you see but panic sometimes, or at least insecurity about how to do things, and so it allows the sector to better prepare and not have any excuses anymore to not arrange this very well. So although it is a pity that the postponement will possibly, it will allow another year of deforestation on the market in the EU. It also allows for a broader, let's say, also taking on board other sustainability issues that always have been on the radar of the soy sector, and that is sustainable agricultural practices, like chemicals management and labor, and all these things that matter for EUDR and other, not so much for the EUDR, but for other laws in the EU. So it allows also to better search for combinations of tools that will cater for EUDR, but also for other types of requirements, if you know what I mean. Because in the voluntary world, there has been a lot of attention for a much broader sustainability agenda, like in certification systems, the RTRS or the Protero or the Donau Soja and others. So this is, let's say, experience that now is not really integrated into the whole due diligence package. But now that there is more time, I think it also allows for smart combinations of tools and values, I must say. So this is actually the most important message I think that we should do, that use the time to better prepare and be future-proof in your company policies.
Thank you. A bit interesting question to you, Will. What do you think? What do you see as the key impacts of EUDR delay?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, thanks for the invitation to be part of the great panel, and it's been helpful to follow the PALM crew before jumping in here. I mean, I think for the past 18 months, we've been on quite the ride. Retailers have really been leading the private sector on calling for the EU to even pass the legislation to begin with. This was frankly because without that legislation, there would have been even less movement to address forest loss associated with soy production than there is today. And where we are today isn't great, but it's a lot further than we were even just 6 months ago. So the delay is as Heleen just said, it will have a tangible impact in terms of the level of activity to prevent further losses from occurring. Because sadly, over the last 6 months, what we haven't seen changed is the prevention of conversion and deforestation to produce more soy or to allow for more cattle grazing in South America, because we've certainly seen that. It's also not been that there's been some sort of great recognition that the conversion of these landscapes is being observed of having a direct impact on local weather and climate change, which is further exacerbating risks and resilience of the supply chain to drought and heat waves, which are already lowering yields and presenting broader challenges for the sector. And sadly, it's also not because companies which are affected by EUDR or others have really gone above and beyond their commitments to deliver deforestation conversion-free supply chains over the next year. Really, the only thing that's driven progress over the last 6 months has been EUDR itself. So over the last 2 months, what's really borne out is that the lack of consistency and certainty, as Wei indicated a bit earlier, meant that things sort of went on hold for a bit. And we're now hearing that deforestation-free soy is simply not available until 2026, even though we know that logistical supply chains and management systems that the major importers would be needing to provide this today are already in place. We know that not just because the announced delay was very late, right before it went into force, only 3 months, which means that if you were a major importer or exporter and had done nothing to deliver the supply chain, you would have some questions for your board about how they manage risk and resilience of their own operations, but also because downstream companies have been offered EUDR compliant products since last summer. The prices of said products, of course, have reduced throughout 2025, right up until there was the delay, because now suddenly they're either unavailable or the prices have reversed and gone back up again, with companies being told to not go faster than the legislation in the timing of when they would be expecting compliance, nor the scope to expand to conversion, which isn't covered by the EUDR. So all of this means that at the moment, we're sort of stuck in a state of persistent inaction and finger pointing. The regulators are told that there isn't demand for compliant soy and EUDR isn't feasible because they can't sell the product at a premium when they'd like to, but the premium's too high. So downstream customers aren't able to agree to do that, partly because the premium's high because it's still a niche product. Until EUDR comes into force and does what it is intended to do, which is levels the market and making deforestation free the norm, these challenges are going to be remaining, and the clear demand signal from a market can't be clearer than the EUDR, and without it, it's a fragmented signal. So in terms of how retailers and companies are responding, they simply can't pull back, principally because even with those products that were being offered, nobody really ever said, here's the evidence that you're going to be getting to demonstrate compliance with the EUDR beyond just, we'll sell you the product. So the lack of those details are really things that need to be worked out. And this 12-month delay that we have is a chance to really ensure that the definitions and evidence, as well as the kind of transition pathway to going forward, really bears out. And it's not just a leap of faith that at the end of the year, everything's going to be fine. So as far as kind of retailers and branded manufacturers are concerned, doing dry runs and risk assessments, working on governance, and pushing the supply chains to transform, those are all need to continue at pace throughout 2025. And certainly the lessons that we had from the first half of 2024 was that if you don't keep the pressure on, nothing tends to actually happen until you get quite close to a clear deadline. So having a timeline with the consistency and transparency that's needed is where we're seeing companies continue to press and not waste any time, because the first 12 months of EUDR were effectively not used to their best ability.
Thank you. I guess there is a risk that the same thing happens again, that it's the can is kicked down the road for 12 months, and people and companies delay further now. They don't get on with it. But I guess your point is that the companies need to get on with it right now.
Yeah, certainly as of October, nobody was ready. Partly that was down to the European Commission delaying the guidance and clarifications that were needed for companies to act. But there was a lot more of just people didn't put the systems and processes in place, didn't assign governments, didn't assign KPIs or accountability for delivering against EUDR. We've not seen a sea change of that. In fact, it's usually been pushed back a bit more. So the downstream company pressure that happens from retailers and others to ensure that their supply chains are resilient, that just can't be pulled back. How the approach is done, I think, will evolve because you've got more time. But the lessons of it was if we just left the market to itself, the first 12 months of EUDR said the market didn't do anything about it. And when our first kind of engagement with the full supply chain started to take place in June, we still had 3/4 of the market responding not knowing what EUDR even was. So the capacity building, education, consistency, clarity, all that stuff needs to be continuing. It's a breathing space that we have. It is not a go take a holiday and come back to it in 10 months.
Okay, thank you, Will. Susanne, thank you for your patience. Same question to you. So, what are the key impacts of the EUDR delay in soy?
Yeah, Heleen, Will mentioned already several points. I'm from Donau Soja organization, which is a European organization, so that's why I try to focus on the situation a bit more in Europe. We are having more than 300 members from the soy sector in Europe, and we are having the discussions with our members and partners almost on a daily basis. The situation is very difficult. Of course, now we have some sort of a clarity, but there is still so many discussions and rumors going on about potential future simplifications, finding a backdoor for the zero risk whatsoever. So I think that is basically the biggest problem, that because of all these discussions about the delay, the insecurity now still continues. Talking about the different sectors and geographies, first of all, of course, we have the EU soy cultivation, EU farmers. Here we do have the paradox situation that basically everybody is really complaining because most of member states simply forgot to tell their farmers that EUDR also applies for European cultivation. And many countries haven't done their homework, because theoretically very easy to take all the data that are already available today in some databases like for EU subsidies, GAP and so on. There could be interfaces to simply technically transfer the data and the job would be done. So it would be really simple. But actually at the moment we see here most of the protests right now because simply governments were really, and authorities were really in delay to inform their farmers and support them. But in the long run, definitely the EUDR will be very positive for the soy sector in the EU, which is actually badly needed because we have only 8% self-sufficiency in the EU. For non-EU countries is a very mixed picture. Of course, it depends on the agricultural system, if it's a lot of small farmers or rather bigger entities, if there is a political support for the farmers and the processors, and if there is international companies that are also doing this sort of a job. I would like to take two examples of countries where we do have offices. First one is Serbia, is an important soy cultivation country in Europe. There we have thousands of small farmers, and unfortunately, government, ministry, authorities are not supporting their farmers. So this is a very unfortunate combination. And here, organizations like Donau Soja, but also international companies and some, let's say, few EU representatives from, or member state representatives actually from the Dutch, are really very active in the sector, trying to help and to inform the farmers and to get them ready. But honestly, I have to say that we have been not very positive about Serbian soy sector to be able to fulfill requirements and to be fit for purpose January 24. So for them, obviously, it will be a benefit. It is a benefit that there is a delay if they're using the time to prepare instead of waiting. If there would be probably some other simplifications like the zero risk, because that, of course, would be a big game changer. Because Serbia most likely would be a zero risk country, and then suddenly they don't need to do anything in terms of due diligence proofs. Completely different country and situation is Ukraine. It's the biggest soy cultivation country in Europe. It's producing 6 million tons of soy. That's basically double the amount of the whole EU. And in Ukraine, actually, we do have a lot of projects. We are having more than 30 partners in soy cultivation that are undergoing certification. Donau Soja certification, which means that they are not only non-GM, but also deforestation and conversion free. So 600,000 tons. And I have to say that also the political environment is quite favorable, as the government is very much looking towards Western Europe and trying to become member of the EU. So there is authority support. And for the Ukrainian soy sector, we are very positive that large parts of the sector would meet the requirements of the EUDR already January 24. So we are having the discussions with our members on a daily basis. And as I explained, we have a very mixed situation. Some of our partners are really happy about the delay. Others are really frustrated because they invested in technical things. They were looking for a supply of soy that is EUDR compliant. They pay higher prices. And now, of course, it is an economic disadvantage. Yeah, so that's a bit the situation that I can talk about from the European side.
Thanks very much indeed. Looking forward then, what beyond EUDR is required to really develop a long-term sustainable soy supply chain? Heleen.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to say that I'm coordinator also of the Collaborative Soy Initiative, in which Susanne is also involved. And there we try to guide companies to, let's say, to embed EUDR as an important element in a robust company policy. So it is an important mechanism, let's say, to arrange for traceability and to in a mandatory way, control on the legality of land use. So that is an important package, but it's indeed not enough. So we have a hand, lending a hand, like know your EUDR compliance basics, but not treat EUDR in isolation. There's more to it. We have other EU laws on due diligence, on sustainability reporting, etc., that have a broader agenda. You need a good due diligence policy in general. So to point, let's say, at the weak spots and at risks, let's say, and where you know the risks are, and soy is quite well known for some risks. We started working on soy because of the chemicals issue, so long ago, and it's still an issue. So good agricultural practices, labor, other things, human rights are very important there. And then also don't treat the EU in isolation, in the sense that if you are a big trader or a big company, then and you arrange your due diligence systems, and you arrange your traceability systems, and you arrange your verification mechanisms, then try and do so also for other markets, be they the US or the China or elsewhere. Then you really have an impact on how trade would work. And last not least, reach out to risk landscapes, to farmers who do a good job in risk landscapes, and invest in conservation and nature regeneration also in where the problem really is. So that let's say that combination of let's say engagement and tools for companies, that would make a robust soy policy in our view. Thank you.
Thanks, Heleen. Well, same question to you then. What beyond EUDR and what's involved there is required for long-term sustainable soy?
Yes, I think for the past 2 decades, the private sector downstream of soy producers and traders has pushed quite hard on addressing the risks of deforestation. Some things have worked and some things haven't. I would characterize EUDR as kind of being the peak of the approach of what was called kind of cleaning the supply chain. So of trying to get specific requirements to make sure that the actual product that you had on the shelf was deforestation free. But the writing on the wall from the EUDR means that we're already kind of seeing the outcomes from that. We can already see that in Brazil, the export market is largely being free of deforestation now. Now, the evidence for that's not 100% yet. That's where we've got some of those gaps. But in terms of new studies that are coming out, it's showing that where whether deforestation-linked beef or soy is in the market, it tends to be consumed more domestically now rather than going to the export market. So I say you've reached the peak of what the supply chain direct action can kind of do, because once you've cleaned your supply chain and you don't actually have a direct connection to deforestation anymore, which is what EUDR will start to unlock, you're then left with, does that mean we've addressed the problem? And I think that as Susanne and Heleen have already put out, we're seeing new interest in dealing with this from China. So it's not just a European issue anymore. But when we look at what success is going to look like, none of these actions, none of this cleaning of the supply chain has actually addressed the root causes of deforestation and conversion. And that's why it still continues. And to do that, we actually need to deliver for producers. And I think that there's effectively three things that we need to be looking at here. The first of which has come up in a number of different forums I've been in over the past few months, but we need to make sure that the whole market recognizes that these landscapes are assets. And if they're assets, they need to be returning something for the producers and the landowners for them, to not convert them and put them into arable production or cattle production. The second one is that we need to be treating each party fairly as well. There's been quite a lot of, and especially with EUDR and some of the voices that are happening in producing markets about this being a huge stick that's being whacked at them without any kind of recognition for good work. Brazil does have very strong forest protection legislation that requires more protections than Europeans do within their own national governments for these landowners. So continuing to push and push and push without having anything go in return is something that we do need to address. And third, as Wei kind of indicated before too, consistency. We just can't get away from that. Changing policies, moving dates, all of that creates more problems. When business knows what needs to be done, they will do it. And that's what we could see happening even in the very short period where EUDR might have landed by the end of 2024 in practice. If it needs to happen, it will happen. But if we start moving goalposts around, changing requirements, that's where things start to fall apart. So this means that everybody, not just retailers, are moving to ensure that kind of private and public initiatives really need to start scaling rapidly at the landscape scale that put producers more at the heart of the solution rather than just being the problem that legislation is trying to restrict the actions of. EUDR does part of what's needed. It draws a line. It unlocks transparency and traceability in ways that we were told was impossible and would never take place in the soy sector. And yet, within a 6-month period, 12-month period, the work of the shippers, the work of the national governments, Argentina, to really move national initiatives to transform, to unlock these, that's been pushed because of the EUDR. And it is a big stick for non-compliance, which is why those have been effective. But there aren't many carrots right now. And beyond market access to the wonderful European market where you've got a stable currency and a good price that's being paid, we need to make sure that there's a real incentive for producers to really buy into this being something that's beneficial for them as individuals, and not just something that's seen as a stick by somebody who's far away. I mean, of course, we know that EUDR is not perfect in itself anyway, just in terms of the scope, not including conversion, which is what's most relevant to soy. But if we can sort out something that puts producers more at the heart of things and in a way that everybody, whether it's going to be through subsidies for production, or it's going to be initiatives like the Responsible Commodities Facility that gets direct income to producers for following through on a commitment not to deforest or clear their land, that's where we need to see consistency, and that's where we need to see scaling.
Thank you, Will. Thanks so much indeed. Susanne, same question to you. Is it all about bringing the producers more to the fore here and making it work for them in terms of thinking about long-term sustainable soy supply? I'm afraid you're on mute.
Sorry. So I think what you really need is a perspective of clarity, predictability, and legal certainty for the farmers and the whole soy sector. I think this is really key. And what we also need desperately is a system that creates fair and level playing field for the ones, so that the front runners and the ones that are doing their homeworks and the pioneers, that they are rewarded in some way and not punished, like it is right now, the ones that have prepared, and there is a lot of players in the market that are well prepared for the system to work January 24, but they have the economic disadvantage right now. So this is a completely unacceptable situation. And this really would need to change. And otherwise, I would really refer to what Heleen said already. In the CSI, we have developed a guidance to the EUDR that really also goes beyond. So it's important to see the EUDR not only in isolation. It's about the CSRD, the triple P. It's about other aspects, work, pesticides, conversion-free, CO2 reduction. All these things need to be seen together. And then, of course, if companies doing an effort to comply with, because of exports to the EU, they should apply those things not only for the material that's going to Europe, but also for the other markets. Yeah, I think that's in brief.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to our soy panel. I'd like to bring everyone back in now. We'll go to Q&A. I know that some of the panelists have been very kindly already responding to some of our questions. So we will go back over some of them again, just so that we can have a broader discussion. But thank you very much indeed. Okay, first point I'd like to put to you all, and obviously bring Michelle. There we are. Lovely to see everyone back. Michelle, welcome. I will put the question to one or two of you. If you'd like to come in and respond, and I haven't put the question to you, panelists, please do use the raise arm function, as I said. Okay, so our question: what steps can companies and supply chains take proactively during the delay and turn this into a competitive advantage in 2025? Wee Peng from Louis Dreyfus. How can you turn this all into a competitive advantage?
Yeah, actually, thank you for the question. Well, we actually have been doing that all along during 2024, proactively embrace the implementation and hoping to build a competitive business advantage out of it. As we saw what has happened in 2024, the supply of EUDR aligned products, well, at least for the initial period, will be limited. So this creates opportunities for more, proactive companies to increase their market presence and market share in the European market, and this is definitely a competitive advantage that companies like us we are interested to create, and we have pre-invested into compliance. Well, in terms of for soy, the biggest investment, unfortunately, has gone into logistical operations for the physical segregation, because for soy, this is a completely new way of operating the supply chain compared to the previous, commingling approach, which, serves the purpose of maximizing the supply chain efficiency. Now we need to create this segregated flow at every stage of the supply chain, from farm to silos to transportation ports to crushing plants and to loading port at destination. At origin. So all these require additional storage and processing capacities. So well, in this case of EUDR delay, some of these pre-investments, unfortunately, they will be booked as a cost for 2024, because there is not going to be an immediate market demand in 2025 to compensate or reimburse some of these pre-investments. But again, they are not 100% wasted. They are still helpful for us to be hopefully early in EUDR compliance into 2025 and 2026. So again, I think we as a company, we definitely look at this as an opportunity for us to really continue to serve the European market, to meet the demand for sustainable products. But at the same time, we again, the EUDR, it serves to clean up one supply chain, but not all supply chains. So we cannot lose out on the fact that we need intervention at the farm level as well, very well articulated. The real change needs to happen at the farm level to change the farmers' economics between conversion versus conservation. And that is the real, solution to end deforestation and conversion driven by soy. So we are investing also into sustainable landscape transformation projects in our supply chain and at the landscape level. So that again, EUDR is one of the tools that will help curb the deforestation, but it needs to be complemented by many other things. And then there's space for all the stakeholders to make their own contributions.
Thank you very much indeed. Another question, interesting question around the declaration windows and the challenges that throws up. A question asks about, because so many commodities are put into silos. In cases where silos are not emptied regularly or quickly enough, perhaps, how can you determine the declaration window? Will, I wondered if you might be interested in having a go at that one.
Well, this is one of the things that was very helpful when the European Commission did release their new guidance in October, when they also announced the delay, is that the expectation around how a due diligence statement could include what's called in excess kind of volumes, so that you don't need to make sure that you've only got everything within a silo at a given point of time that's directly traceable to a single farm, but you recognize that over the course of a season, supply chains will fluctuate. That was a very pragmatic move. They have a nice footnote against it that's basically at your risk you do this, and that you shouldn't be over including every potential landscape of just saying, well, anywhere in Brazil could go to this facility, and that would probably stimulate a kind of an enforcement action to investigate. But in terms of the kind of downstream market, the beauty of EUDR is that those problems all happen outside of the EU. I think that Susanne would say that there's still problems inside the EU where you have European soy production, where that would be the case. But again, by having that kind of in excess production, or if there's a zero risk point for a country, you're able to mitigate that to some degree. But for soy, we have to remember that almost all soy in Europe is consumed as animal feed, in which case you only have a few actors that are really critical to that, because it stops once you get to the feed manufacturing and the feed mills. And after that, it goes and you effectively get into a mass balancing type system anyway, if you're trying to deal with certification. And with EUDR, it's just all compliant. So it's looking at where in the value chain, this is a kind of a relevant point of mixing, where you need the data and the logistical supply chains to support them. But with that clarification, which wasn't there until October, it was potentially a big headache, and now it's more manageable. And I think that most shippers would be able to deal with this in a more effective way than they were previously.
Thanks, Will. Susanne, did you want to comment further on the silo point? Susanne, did you want to comment? Yeah.
Sorry, I had a short break. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, it was. Let me find it again. Yes, it's where in the instance where silos are used. So often commodities are stored in silos. Silos can be large, perhaps not emptied all the time or regularly. How then do you determine the declaration window? So what are the challenges put up by having silos in this instance?
Well, I'm not really sure if I'm the right person to answer this.
Right. No problem. Will's give a great answer. That's fine. I just wondered if you wanted to comment further.
I think you will get some quite good answers. We are basically specialized with our standard anyways to a situation where we do have the full segregation, and our partners are handling this issue on a daily basis. So that's one of the reasons why also certifications are really beneficial in this context. And the three standards like Forterra, RTRS, and Donau Soja are working together in the Collaborative Soy Initiative, because we do think that such kind of systems in the long run are anyways the better alternative. Yeah.
Okay, no, thanks very much indeed. Question on our questioners asked how companies can ensure that their suppliers include and support smallholder farmers. So I guess if you're a brand buying commodities in the international markets, how can you ensure that suppliers include and support smallholder farmers? Ruben.
Well, as I mentioned before, the RSPO has some specific supply chain models that are dedicated to including smallholder farmers, such as our book and claim system, where you can buy credits from independent smallholders that directly support smallholder farmers. There has been some misconception about that not being EUDR compliant, but EUDR doesn't say anything about the use of book and claim or credits. It doesn't prohibit it in any way, as long as you know that your physical supply is deforestation free and legally produced. So there is still a possibility for companies in Europe to buy independent smallholder credits and directly support smallholder farmers in that way. And we also support members and sometimes also not members who are reaching out to us to look at their sourcing policies, to help them draft them, to make sure that smallholder inclusion is a key cornerstone of their sourcing policies. And in that way, we try to support and also make the linkages between the companies in Europe and smallholders in Indonesia. We have a specifically dedicated team within the RSP also that has the contacts on the ground. So if anybody is interested in specifically knowing more about smallholders or getting in contact with them, they're also welcome to contact me after this seminar.
Thanks, Ruben. Mansuetus, pardon me. I wonder if I could put the same question to you. How do you, from your perspective, want to ensure that the support comes to you? What do you do from the other end of the supply chain?
Yeah, as I said before, our members already have geolocation as required by EUDR. But we need a market in the EU to encourage their suppliers in Indonesia to work with us because our members already traceable. Of course, we need funding policies from EU and also buyers in the EU to help smallholders in Indonesia in order to meet the EUDR requirement. In addition, we will engage several palm oil companies and buyers in the EU to build a joint collaboration in helping smallholders so that they are not neglected in the supply chain.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I've got a question I'd like to put to our soy experts. We talked about Brazil a little bit in the earlier conversation. When we have a specific point around Brazil, our questioner points out that most of Brazilian soy, 80% is mentioned here, is exported to China. What's your views on the importance of China also looking for deforestation-free soy? And what's the impact of the EU delay on that in terms of the soy supply for EU versus soy supply going to China? Heleen.
Yes, not that I'm a Brazil or a China expert, but I could take this one. One of the things that is also important to strengthen in this whole process is national and regional verification systems, public systems, let's say, that can help in the traceability and sometimes also in the verification of legality. In that way, it is the responsibility of the operators and traders under the EUDR. But if you also, let's say, strengthen those local systems, you may have a stronger effect on good governance in producing countries, including also different markets, so also the market to China. So that that would have a long-lasting effect on public governance, you could say. So that is one point not made yet. I would like to make. So I don't think there is a that it may be I don't think that has to do with the delay. The delay will enable give more time to pay attention to these elements of good governance. So apart from your own systems in your trade chains that are not that are not transparent to the public, but this is maybe transparent to the public, which is also a very important aspect of good trade practices. Thanks.
Thank you. Wee Peng from Louis Dreyfus, you wanted to come in?
Sure. Yeah, just to share some experience. Well, I'm Chinese, by the way, so and as a company, we engage indeed with a lot of Chinese stakeholders from the public and private sectors on this topic. We definitely observe an increasing level of awareness and interest in this topic from different stakeholders from the public and private sectors in China. Actually, as a company, we have just shipped the first vessel of deforestation, verified deforestation free to China, to a Chinese customer. So the interest is definitely growing, and then the concern is also growing. But again, I just want to emphasize, while it's important for the destination markets to send a clear signal, the legislative or regulatory measures are not going to be enough to address the real root causes of deforestation that are taking place legally or illegally at production countries. Even if all destination markets, only by setting a regulation or sending a demand signal itself, that would not be sufficient. We really have to have a deep, hard, and honest look at the root causes, and to really at the farm level, to try to change the economics again between conservation and conversion, and that cannot be delivered only by imposing requirements on the producers beyond what they are legally obliged to do by the production country legislation. So just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you very much. Susanne or Will, do you want to comment on that specific soy issue?
I think to echo Wei, that's consistent with what we've seen too. I was just on a meeting last week with Chinese retailers who were looking at what actions they needed to be taking to move to address deforestation and conversion within soy production within their own value chains, and using the European kind of retail landscape as a case study. And that's followed. It's been 7 years since the Chinese Sustainable Meat Declaration, where they are looking at removing deforestation associated with beef. And there wasn't much movement on that for a number of years, but now that's picking up. But completely echo with what Wei said and what I've referred to earlier of the demand market signal alone isn't going to solve the problem. And we are seeing that the shifting of the landscape in terms of clean exports, not linked to deforestation, have been increasing over a number of years, whether it's to China or to Europe. It's still not solving the problem. The producer side of the equation is really where we're looking at innovation and opportunity over the next 5 years to actually deliver on our global goal of eradicating deforestation in its entirety by 2030.
Thank you. Mansuetus, another question for you. I know you have responded to this directly, but I just want to just to kind of air it with everybody. The question was about how well you think information necessary around EUDR has reached smallholder farmers. I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that. How well has the information reached the farmers?
Yeah, I think we need a collaboration with the private sector and national government. For example, because at the local level, Indonesia already established local action plan toward sustainable palm oil. So already multi-stakeholders. So how to use multi-stakeholders at the local level or at the national level to introduce or to create like a socialization about the EUDR standard for farmers, and how to like engage the companies work with the farmers fairly. For example, create partnership with the smallholders cooperative around the companies, and then empowering with the training best management practices to know better understand about the sustainability and EUDR requirements like that.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to bring Michelle in. We have one of our questions was asking about implications of changing political landscape, particularly most recently in the US. So, Michelle, what does that impact going to have, do you think, on your work in this space, and your thoughts on the impact on the forest more generally? Michelle, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. Yes, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. It was a question you have responded to, but what's the impact of the changing political environment on your work in forests?
Political environment as far as, so there.
I suspect the questioner is meaning in a renewed Trump administration in the White House.
Yeah, okay. Well, I hesitate to say that well, I don't hesitate. It's quite true that I fear that we won't see much movement in the U.S. Forest Act as a result of this administration coming in. That's not to say that we shouldn't keep pushing for it, but we might find more traction in the state-based initiatives such as New York Declaration, or look towards other markets to deliver similar legislation and push for that this the EUDR sends a signal to the global marketplace that we need to decouple deforestation from these risk commodities, and it's going to be important that the momentum is kept up, and that's again a grievance with the postponement is it's kind of put that the reputation in the EU as driving this a little bit at risk. And yeah, I think that's about what I can say about that. I think we need to keep up the momentum, use this time to really push for the more global. We're talking about global corporations. If they're going to have policies in place to comply with the EUDR, one would assume that those policies would also extend to the other markets.
Okay, and do you sense that there is inevitably going to be a bit of a backlash against the EU, the kind of confusion there's been around EUDR? The EU will not maintain quite the reputation it had for driving this forward.
I think the postponement has jeopardized that to some extent, but on the other hand, I think now that we know it's postponed, if we just move forward on the new timeline, so forth, that we can recover the reputation a bit, start to recover it, let's put it that way. And then that could have lasting impacts on the global marketplace that would then result in the real change on the ground that we need to see, because we're concerned about, we know that a lot of the palm oil production, especially in the countries where palm oil is expanding, is going to domestic markets, or they're going to less sensitive markets. So how do we address that kind of leakage and so forth? So if we have more global markets on board, then that should start to mitigate that issue to some degree.
Thanks, Michelle. Ruben, you wanted to come in? Ruben, on mute. Ruben, you're on mute. Ruben, sorry, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Apologies. No, I just wanted to frame this a little bit more positive. I'm an optimist by nature, and I do think that we're going to see that does the EUDR is EUDR the game changer in terms of global deforestation? No, definitely not in the field of palm oil, where approximately 90%, as Michelle in her opening already said, is already RSPO certified for Europe. So that's not going to make a huge difference. We also know that countries such as Indonesia, for instance, are already a bigger consumer than the EU when it comes to palm oil. We always refer to it as a production country, but it's a huge consumption country. So the difference will have to be made in Indonesia, in India, in China. That's where we need to shift the markets. Now, I really like the way Will phrased it earlier when he said EUDR is not like the golden bullet or solution, but it has really, how do you say it? It has really unlocked new levels of transparency and traceability. And it has really already changed the behavior of companies who will do what is required and who can do that. And we see that moving in Europe already. We see that even companies that are not directly falling under the obligations are changing their policies because their customers simply want the products to be EUDR compliant. So we see this as having a positive effect. And I'm convinced that when our children or our children's children look back in 75 to 100 years from now, which is nothing on the global timeline, that we will see this kind of legislation not only in the EU, in the UK, in the US, but also in China, where the discussions have already started, and in other parts of the world. And then we can look back at this panel and say, yes, we were part of an EU that took the first step and took its responsibility to become a regional responsible consumer. And I think that is something as Europe that we can still be proud of, even if it's not the effective instrument that we all want it to be from the get-go. I think it is something that we should really be proud of as Europe.
Thanks, Ruben. Okay, we're coming towards the end. I'd like to just give everybody a chance just to kind of see what their kind of key point is that they want everyone else to take away from the webinar. Let me start with you, Susanne. What's been your key point from the webinar you'd like the audience to remember? Briefly, if you would.
Well, apart from clarity and legal security that is absolutely necessary, I think what we really need is a fair and level playing field for all the players. And we really need to check that we have favorable conditions for the pioneers and the front runners and the ones that are doing their job instead of punishing them. Because this is really a very negative effect of the delay. And we really need to be careful that this does not become a really significant precedent also for other occasions.
Thanks, Susanne. Will?
Yeah, I think that, as I said, we've seen that the clean supply chains aren't solving the problem, and EUDR is only going to be one of the pegs that we've got. We know that voluntary commitments don't solve it either. Regulations are absolutely part of this. But ultimately, when we're looking for these solutions, it's going to be going beyond. So for the moment, it's make sure that your supply chain is okay and compliant with the EUDR. Make sure that you've got the traceability that continues to unwind and that you can push to make sure that there's a clear transition pathway for the value chain. But at the same time, you've got to start engaging on, what types of financial instruments and payment for ecosystem service initiatives, whether they be at the governmental kind of subsidy level or the private sector initiative through, loans and finance, are actually going to be ultimately solving the root causes. So there's lots to look forward to. There's lots of work to be done, but it's EUDR plus. It's not just EUDR.
Thanks, Will. Heleen?
Yes, indeed, EUDR Plus. Choose for a combination of tools that can cover all relevant aspects of soy sustainability, because we can really be proud as the EU not just to implement the EUDR, but to support farmers and enable them to produce sustainably, so deforestation conversion-free and with responsible agricultural practices.
Thank you. Mansuetus?
Yeah, I think the key, in my opinion, is transparency of the companies and how companies can work fairly with the smallest farmers at the local level, and empowering smallholders around their conversation, like service, like training services, provide polygon, establish smallholders cooperative like that. In addition, upstream, downstream companies must be collaboration. I think it is very important to help farmers.
Thank you very much indeed. Ruben? Briefly, if you would, coming very
Two
close to
short
the time.
points. One is EUDR is here. Let's stop complaining and let's get to work really to make sure we implement this well at the end of the year. So communicate and cooperate, reach out to as many partners as you can, and you have to make sure that you're ready by the end of this year. And my other point is sustainability is still broader than just deforestation, luckily, right? There are so many other topics. Some of them have to do with legislation around the corner, social topics, forced labor, etc. But it's much broader than that. That's why we have also certifications such as ours, such as the certifications that were mentioned in soy, because there are a lot of other fields that we have to keep on our radar besides only deforestation if we really want to work towards a sustainable future.
Thank you, Weepeng.
I would echo what Susanne already said. We need clarity, we need certainty that allows companies to pre-invest again in 2025 with the confidence that their investment will be recognized by the market. That's the first point. And the second point is that, again, keep reminding ourselves that the producers, they need to be at the table, and they need to be at the center of any solutions towards deforestation-free production, because after all, they are the owner and the operator of the land that we want to see under conservation. So if they're not engaged and they're not aligned on that objective and then supported to achieve that objective, everything else will not be so meaningful. So we really have to engage with them and bring them into the discussions for this kind of multi-stakeholder collaboration where we've been talking about between public and private.
Thank you very much indeed. And Michelle, final word to you. I'm afraid you're on mute, Michelle.
Okay, are we here now?
Yep.
So sorry. Ruben rather stole what I was going to say, that I think we need to celebrate that the EUDR is pioneering, it is groundbreaking. Once it is, we need to keep up the momentum to ensure that implementation is robust and really pushes the needle. My view is towards demonstrating a global demand for deforestation-free products and the need for regulation in producer and consumer countries around the globe. And I think this will spearhead that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. Thank you to all the panel. It's been a really, really interesting 90 minutes discussion. Thank you so much for all your contributions and your insights. Really, really much appreciated. And thank you very much to our audience for all your questions. We got through a lot of them, so thank you very much indeed for those. So we will be in touch with the recordings, audio and video, but also please do let us know if there are other topics you'd like us to cover in webinars, and if you'd like to partner with us on a similar webinar. This is our final webinar of 2024. So for now, thanks very much indeed. Happy New Year when it comes, and all the best.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.